Good afternoon. I am pleased to be able to represent the Department of Sociology and greet you via video since I am unable to be there in person today. First, a disclosure. I began my higher education at Brown and graduated with an SCB in Applied Mathematics and Economics. I note that the departmental stars align today with both Applied Mathematics and Sociology on the program. I was reflecting on the irony of this and realized that somewhere between my graduation from Brown and beginning my career as a sociologist, I became less interested in solving math equations and learning queuing theory, and more interested in studying systems where the variables talk back, at times refuse to cooperate, and occasionally contradict one another. When I say that I am a sociologist, sometimes people in the general public respond, "Oh, that's great, you help people." So some people assume I'm a therapist. But generally, academic sociologists are neither therapists, social workers, nor clinical psychologists. But we are interested in how people live together, how our everyday choices, relationships, and institutions shape who gets opportunity and who does not. I'll discuss the study of sociology in a moment. But I want to start with a concept that sociologist of education and immigration, Roberta Mendoza, refers to as a pivotal moment. In the 11th grade, at the spry age of 16, a high school history teacher handed me a blue catalog. Inside was information about a 6-week summer program at an elite boarding school here on the East Coast, a feeder school to Brown and other Ivies, and a place I had never heard of, having grown up in the de facto segregated South. That pivotal moment changed my life's trajectory. It exposed me to new academic resources and expectations, new peers, and new possibilities. It laid the foundation for me to apply to and attend Brown. And later, I would have the opportunity to work as a Brown admission officer. As I collected the airline miles and traveled from state to state around the nation on Brown's behalf, those numerous school visits and really difficult admissions discussions led to another pivotal moment in my life. Seeing the stark inequities in educational opportunities firsthand shaped my career path and inspired my decision to pursue an academic research career in sociology. So what is sociology? Quite simply, sociologists ask how and what society works and for whom. Brown established the 4th sociology department in the United States in 1891, and the discipline was created in 1905. Sociologists ask and address nearly every facet of society in scholarship and research and teaching. Notably at Brown, we have experts who focus on the global, the national, and local, who examine social institutions like the family, neighborhoods, education, the environment, economy, government, mass incarceration, race, gender, and class inequalities, and more. My research focuses on inequality, how it is produced and reproduced through one of our most important social institutions, education. I examine social and economic dynamics among groups within schools and their disparate outcomes. I also examine how wider social forces such as racism and racial structures and discrimination, economic inequality and poverty, and more recently, how the advent of a significant technological turn with artificial intelligence will permeate school walls and shape educational systems and outcomes. A core sociological question that drives my imagination is, how do we build schools that are not just academically strong, but genuinely inclusive? To answer that question, I have argued that we must rethink how we talk about educational inequality. Researchers often use the term achievement gaps and may focus on the outputs of students based on their racial and class backgrounds. But I argue we should interrogate the inputs, the opportunity gaps. Here's a metaphor. Imagine we tell all students to get to the 16th floor of a high-rise building. Some are riding elevators going at the rate of a bullet-speed train. Others are on smooth escalators, moving up and up, the cogs neatly oiled. And some are climbing broken stairwells with missing steps and no handrails. Then we judge them based on who arrives first. That's just not unfair. It misses the mark on how social and economic and political contexts shape access and opportunity and well-being. And even when students from broken stairwells succeed, and some do, it creates the illusion that the system works. Meanwhile, we've spent more time in practice and policy on making them run faster instead of ameliorating the conditions that inhibit their mobility. Research studies and much data show that relative group-level inequality remains remarkably stable across generations based on students' social backgrounds. So my research questions also include asking if we're not prepared to fundamentally change political, economic, and social inequality through policy, what can education and schooling realistically do to interrupt its reproduction? Now, this question led me to a study of the material and sociocultural context of high schools in the United States and South Africa, two societies marked by their distinctive histories with settler colonialism and racism. I went back to high school, and I examined how everyday school practices, from tracking, participation in extracurricular activities, seating patterns, teacher expectations, school policies and codes, signal to students who belong and who do not in various facets of school life. I also examined something I refer to as cultural flexibility. The willingness of students and educators to move across racial and cultural boundaries and be comfortable with difference in different schooling environments. Using a measure I developed, I surveyed over 400 students in the schools. And in the school where students averaged the highest on the cultural flexibility scale, which was a South African school, a counselor had created a program that intentionally brought students across lines of race and class for retreats to discuss history, politics, inequality, family differences. Tracking was not allowed in the South African schools to the degree that they exist in the United States. By contrast, in some of the most affluent U.S. schools I studied, schools we often label as excellent, students had few models for navigating those social differences. Academic excellence existed alongside racial and economic segregation internally. Black and Latinx students were separated from their white and Asian peers. Students even labeled classes and activities as for them or that group versus us. This study led me to understand how integration in democratic societies has not been realized, while some modicum of desegregation or diversity has. The study also led me to understand that desegregation allows for demographic change without the depth of organizational and institutional change demanded by true integration, in theory and in practice. Increased access and inclusion are necessary, but they're insufficient. And I've argued that true integration actually demands something deeper, relational equality. We must ask whether different groups of people are being treated as equals in their standings and contributions to how educational and other social institutions operate. Relational equality is embedded in the distribution of what sociologists refer to as social capital. Critical information, important ideas, Inhere in the diversity of friendships, neighbors, peers, colleagues. These are the bearers of information and resources that we possess. And such relationships can fuel and engender empathy, understanding, and therefore potentially significant changes in our social practices and our behaviors, how we live together. Across my work, one insight keeps resurfacing. Inequality is not produced by a single policy or a single bad actor. It is reproduced from the macro to the micro levels, including through everyday ordinary practices, often by well-meaning people, which in turn reproduce broader social patterns of inequality. While laws and policies can regulate some opportunities through access, relational work is way more difficult to policy, especially because it pertains to individuals' private lives and their personal choices. Schools and universities are not just places where we learn math or language or history. They're places where we also learn who gets access, who belongs, who's constructed as intelligent or smart, and what futures feel possible. They're microcosms of broader society, and what happens inside of them shapes how we live together outside of them. You see, I'm passionate about education because I would not be standing here today without a combination of access to opportunities and social capital, which engendered those pivotal moments. While I was growing up, I heard my mother tell a story repeatedly about how when she arrived on campus with a few dollars in her pocket, and she would say 50 cents, a financial aid officer heard her plea for assistance to attend that community college and helped her fill out a Pell Grant. It was her pivotal moment. Educational access saved my parents and their siblings from the harsh realities of sharecropping as children in the rural Mississippi Delta. Pivotal moments put me on a path to study at Brown, shaped my path to becoming a scholar and researcher who examines both the tangible and intangible aspects of access to opportunity in our society. In a moment, you'll hear from two colleagues, Professor Joss Paschowitz, who examines state political context and their relationship to anti-democratic tendencies, and Professor Nicole Gonzalez Van Cleve, who has a forthcoming book on the intersections between race and wrongful convictions in the U.S. criminal justice system. Collectively, our research embraces a fundamental shared question. How can individuals and social groups within institutions work to produce a more viable, healthy, multiracial, multicultural democracy? Thank you.